Alright guys, welcome to the question and answer for my little trophy truck build here. Got a lot to get through. The reason I wanted to do this question and answer was because I recently collaborated with a media company of some sorts out of the UK, and this was after I posted my episodes 1 through 10 recap, and they wanted to chop that up even further and then post it on their Facebook page that has millions of followers. And I thought, that's a good idea, maybe it'll send some people my way. So they took my 10-minute video, which was already chopped up from 5.5 hours of the first 10 episodes, and then they chopped it down from 10 minutes to 4 minutes, and then they posted it. And it got 3.3 million views, and I got 0 subscribers from it. I mean 0. There's not one uptick at all. I mean, write in the comments if you came from there. But as far as I can tell, nobody came to my page. And on Facebook, the comments, they were not very pleasant. Because it was episodes 1 through 10, I hadn't even finished the body, and so the ending of the clip, it just kind of shows me driving around with this janky, open, like floorboards and everything like that, and there's only like 10 seconds of me driving it around, so of course everybody just thought I built this death trap. So I wanted to answer some of those questions and point out some of the comments because they were overwhelmingly terrible. Now on my YouTube channel, I've got almost nothing but wonderful comments and questions. So let's start with what is a trophy truck and is this a trophy truck? Now a trophy truck, generally speaking, is a off-road race truck that is usually running like an unlimited class, and they're tube chassis, complete tube chassis. They have tremendous amounts of travel. They're generally pretty heavy, and they have a fiberglass body that goes on the outside. This is not a trophy truck, not even a little bit. The reason I called it a trophy truck was because I was planning on using the entire trophy truck fiberglass body and having it be a full cage onto the frame construction so that it would look like a trophy truck, and then when you got closer and took the fiberglass off, it would look like the innards of a trophy truck. Now, if you've been following along, you know that I changed up my plans because the fiberglass body dimensions just weren't going to work, especially with how wide it ended up being because I put the engine in the middle. Now, what I should have called it is a pre-runner, but a pre-runner, from Arizona at least, is almost always a two-wheel drive truck with a frame that usually has some caging around it that then has fiberglass bits and pieces bolted on. And so they're made to just kind of tear up through the desert as fast as they can go. They usually have mid-travel somewhere in between a proper race truck and a stock truck. That is really close to what I'm building here. I should have called it a pre-runner, but a lot of people got mad that I called it a trophy truck, so I'm just keeping it that way. Now I want to point out what actual trophy trucks cost because it's ridiculous. A proper trophy truck, new, will cost somewhere between $300,000 and $1 million. I found a couple of used ones here. These are used vehicles, and I'm not going to comment on whether or not the pricing is outrageous because I don't know. I mean, if you're in the market for this and you want to race it and you have money, then that's fine. It seems like a lot of money to me, though. This one here, $240,000. It's used. Doesn't look like it's been abused too much. It looks like it was just completed, but $240,000. This one here, $735,000. It's all-wheel drive. It's used, but it's $735,000. I built mine for $4,000. So an overwhelming number of comments talk about how I didn't use anything from the Crown Vic and that I basically built the vehicle from scratch. Mr. Brian here says, such quality work just to reuse a Crown Vic motor and transmission. Mr. Eric says, this is hardly turning a Crown Vic into, that is using some 2% parts of any old banger for a totally new build. And Benjamin says, title should read trophy truck build since it appears that maybe 1/3 or the Crown Vic was used. 1/3 of the Crown Vic, I think he means, probably less. Okay, well, let's go over what exactly I used from that Crown Vic because that is a common misunderstanding here. The frame. Almost the entire frame was used. I chopped off a little bit of the rear, I chopped off a little bit of the front, but the whole frame, Crown Vic. Steering. Every component on the steering is Crown Vic except for the steering wheel, and I used a shaft to extend it. That's it. The rack and pinion, all the tie rods, all the joints, all the geometry, the configuration of it, it's all Crown Vic. The suspension, the entire suspension except for the coilovers is Crown Vic. The upper control arms, the lower control arms, the ball joints, in the rear, the trailing arms, the Watts linkage, all of that is bone stock Crown Vic. The only thing I did was upgrade the coilovers in the front from coilovers to better coilovers, and then in the rear I upgraded it from coils and shocks to coilovers. That's it. It's basically a stock suspension though. The drivetrain, the engine, the transmission, the axle, that's the entire drivetrain, all stock Crown Vic. The fuel system, it is complete from front to rear, all Crown Vic. The only thing I changed was I used a different hose to get it there, and then I built a container essentially for the fuel tank. The wiring, all of the wiring is Crown Vic. I don't think I even used any additional wiring. I just used some of it that I cut off and put it in its place. Even the battery is from the $635 Crown Vic. That's it. It really should be looked at as a Crown Vic with a different body, slightly different weight, well, not slightly different weight distribution. It goes from being like 65 or 68 front to being like 55 rear. So that's pretty dramatic weight savings. But it's 900 pounds less than a Crown Vic. It has a different body and it has slightly upgraded suspension. That's it. Another thing that was heavily focused on in the comments is how close the engine is going to be to my legs, particularly. So people think that it's a safety or a heat issue. Rich here says, whoosh, all that effort and money and really a cool build, but to sit next to that motor when it's pinned out isn't going to be a fun time. Maybe. Here's one thing to think about. Take any vehicle that's manufactured from 2005 on. This Crown Vic is a 2006. Hop in it, drive it until it gets fully up to operating temperature, stop it, get out, and open up the hood. It's not that hot. I think people are remembering old cars when you'd open up a 78 Nova and it would just waft an unbelievable amount of heat and you couldn't put your hands anywhere near anything. Just billowing heat. New cars don't do that. You can open up a new car after you've been on the racetrack and put your hands within a couple inches of the exhaust manifold, and that's the only thing that's really hot. I mean, the radiator hose is too hot to grab, but really, the entire cooling system is going to run, should be sub 200 degrees, and the exhaust, of course it gets hot, but it's got a heat shield on the driver's side, and then I'm going to put more heat shielding in on it. But we'll see. Maybe it's going to be unbearably hot and I'll have to redo it. I have no way of knowing until I actually really beat on it. Let's see here, what else we got? Oh, this one I like. Wait till the, let me say, most of the mean comments have pretty bad grammatical errors. Wait till the engine, this is Mr. Mon Alpha, he says, wait till the engine blows spark plug out, which is a common in Ford. You'll be missing ear and might be couple teeth, sir. So I think he's concerned that the spark plugs are going to blow out. That was an issue on a very small number of Fords. I know it was the Lightnings, the SVT Lightnings. There was some of them that had, there were some of them that had the 3-valve setup that had 4 threads instead of the 8 machined into the heads, and those had issues shooting the spark plugs out, and they put little ping holes in the hood. I've seen that before. As far as I know, that was isolated only to the 3-valve 5.4 Triton motor. Never heard of it on a 4.6. It's certainly not a Ford issue. The interesting thing about the Crown Vic is that the spark plugs are not on the outside like an old V8, they're on the inside. So if they were to shoot, they would shoot up, not into my leg. The other thing is they're held in by individual coil packs. So if they were to shoot out, the coil packs catch them. And the coil packs are underneath the fuel rail, which is then held in from bolts. So it's possible that it would blow, but it certainly is not going to take out an ear or a couple of teeth. This is a great question. Street Snail Speed Shop asked me, what kind of travel are you getting with the Crown Vic base? Love this question. The factory Crown Vic, as close as I could tell, was about 8 inches of travel in the front, 9 inches in the rear, which is not bad. I'm getting 12 inches in the front, 13 inches in the rear. Now, to put that into perspective, an actual trophy truck is usually around 28 front, 32 rear. So it's a dramatically less. It's dramatically less than a proper trophy truck, but it's not far off from the first generation Ford Raptor, which everyone knows is a fantastic off-road vehicle. I think those were 12 in the front, 13 in the rear as well. It's also really close to, I don't think it was the first generation Rhinos, the side-by-sides. I think it was the second one. It's around the same. The new side-by-sides, like the new Polaris Razors and those things, they can have 28 inches of travel, and they're ridiculous, but they also cost $35,000. So 12 inches front, 13 inches rear, that looks like it's where it's going to be. I could get a lot more if I changed out the control arms in the front, obviously if I built custom ones. And then in the rear, I'm kind of limited because of how far I moved the motor back. If I could go back in time, I would have moved the motor back, but not nearly as far. I would have moved it back 11 inches instead of, I think I ended up at 24 or 30, somewhere in that range. I really moved it back because I was almost singularly focused on weight distribution, and it ended up putting a lot of weight in the rear anyways. I thought I was going to struggle to get 50-50. Looks like I'm going to end up about 45-55. So if I could go back in time, what I would do is I'd move the motor closer to the front. I would sacrifice a little bit of the weight balance, but it would allow me in the future to put on longer arms because I have a longer drive shaft. Without a longer drive shaft, without being able to do a longer drive shaft or a high angle drive shaft, I'm going to be limited in the rear for down travel. But we'll see how it goes. I like this one here. Scrap to Art Metalworks. He asked, question, why did YouTube never suggest your channel to me and I had to find it on my own? No, instead I get suggestions of things I could care less about. That seems to be a common issue that people have, that the Google algorithms. I will tell you, the more you're on YouTube, the better the algorithms get dialed in with what you're interested in, I think. I thought YouTube was just how-to videos until a couple years ago when I saw the Cletus McFarland channel. I was like, that's awesome. I want to do that, and that's why I started this channel. Here's a Q&A from Liberty Auto. Where do you plan to ride locally? Boulder OHV area, north of Lake Pleasant, or Crown King runs? For those not from Arizona, Lake Pleasant, Crown King, those are common off-roading areas. I've never been to the Boulder OHV area. I haven't done Crown King in probably 18 years, I think, somewhere around there. I can't remember if I need four-wheel drive for it. Or if I need four-wheel drive seasonally for it. I think it's a pretty tough trail. I made it through Crown King once in a heavily modified 98 Nissan Altima with a 5-speed manual. So I know it's possible, but I haven't planned on heading up there. I would like to go north of Lake Pleasant. That would be a fantastic area. I'm going to Google around and take a look at the Boulder OHV area. I'm not familiar with there. My initial plan was to go to Lower Sycamore Creek. If you're familiar with the area, you might know it. If you're not familiar, you can Google it. Sycamore Creek is what it's called. It's off the Beeline Highway, which is the 87. You make a right. If you're going north and it's Saguaro Lake, you make a left and it's Lower Sycamore. You go up a little bit, make a right is Four Peaks, and left is Upper Sycamore. Lower Sycamore is fantastic because there's a huge sand wash, and there's little areas where you can kind of figure out ways to make your vehicles jump, and that's what I'm interested in. That's what I'd like to do. As far as I can tell, because of COVID-19, it's closed. And Upper Sycamore is harder to close, if I remember right, because they don't have a gate there, but I can't make it from Upper to Lower because I don't have four-wheel drive. So to answer your question, I'm not sure exactly where I'm going to ride locally. Right now, because of the coronavirus, it's tough to find places that are open, but I'm going to try and find anywhere where I can go fast. That's the goal. I want to drive this thing as fast as possible. I'm not interested in pretty much anything else. I want to go fast, I want to go over jumps, and I want to drive it on the street. I'd like to take it to the drag strip and see what it'll do in the quarter mile, because it's 900 pounds less than a Crown Vic, and I think Crown Vics are running high 14s, low 15s, if I'm not mistaken. So it would be cool to see. Let me know in the comments what you think it would do in a quarter mile, keeping in mind that it's going to have 373 rear end. So the gear ratio will be slightly better at acceleration than it was stock with the stock tires. Giovanni, he asked me, what are you planning on seating? I don't remember if you mentioned it. I mentioned it, but I don't expect you guys to have been following along on all the videos. I have, the back seat is out of a Tahoe. I think it's a 2018 or 2019 Tahoe that was turned into a canine. So the Tahoe was turned into a police canine vehicle. They removed the back seats. I bought them from a guy, I think they were $100 or something like that. They're real cheap. There's going to be 3 seats in the rear. The cool thing is they're going to have all of the factory seat belts, proper, shoulder belts, and they've got all the mounts for child seats, so I can take my little ones in it. I've got a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old. I don't plan on doing anything with the 1-year-old except, slowly putzing around. 5-year-old I can drive a little bit faster, but again, when we get crazy, they won't be in it. But I wanted to have the back seat where I could put in child seats. Let's see, ACO asked me, quick question, did you ever extend the line on the diff breather? Might be worth if you plan on going through water. Also, do you plan on any headlights? Ooh, I've got the headlights on it now, actually. This is going to be my high beam. Those are my low beams. This thing is stupid bright. So that's your question for the headlights. As far as the diff breather, I have not decided. I've thought about it. But I'm really nervous about going through water because it's two-wheel drive and it's so exposed. And the intake, I initially had it sticking out, and I thought that would be good for water, and then I ended up moving it down, which makes a lot more sense. But now that the air is down, when you drive over it, the front tires can kick up water right into the intake, so I'm probably not going to be driving through anything too deep. Honestly, probably not more than a foot. Yeah, probably not more than a foot of water. But I don't know if I'm going to extend the diff breather or not yet. Oh, I get it. Yeah, here's another question about the heat. I'm just glad engines don't get hot. Otherwise, driving more than a few miles would be unbearable. I answered that. Write in the comments, though, if you think I'm crazy for the heat. I'm just not that worried about it. It's like I said, it's got a heat shield. I'm going to add another heat shield, and if I have to, I'll just keep adding heat shields until it's not hot anymore. I've got enough room, really. You only need about 1/4 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch to do a little spacer, and then you do a metal plate, and then in between the two, you do insulation. So it hits the metal, and then it hits the insulation, and then it hits another layer of metal. And the reality is the exhaust manifold is probably not going to get much hotter than 400 degrees. So you're talking about 400 degrees going across 2 inches, 3 inches, with multiple heat insulation in between. Charlie November, he had all those tools available, and that's the best he came up with. So the 3.3 million people that saw it, not one of them knows that this is a $4,000 budget. I think that it's quite impressive for $4,000. That's up to everyone's opinion, but this is not anywhere near the best I've come up with. Here's a few vehicles that I've come up with that I think are a lot better. I took a 55 Ford F100 and I put an entire SVT Lightning drivetrain underneath it and tuned it to 550 horsepower. That was cooler. I took a 56 Ford F100 and gave it a 4-wheel independent suspension and all aluminum 32 valve motor. That was much cooler. I also turned a shipping container into a pizza truck. That was cooler. Basically everything I've built has been cooler than this. Even the world's smallest car, that was cooler than this. You guys probably already know this, but I built this just because I wanted to see what I could do with such an extremely low budget. What I hope to accomplish with this project, realistically, is I want to have something that is somewhere in between a new F-150 and a Raptor. If I can get somewhere in between there, I'd like to be able to go out in the desert with somebody who has a bone stock F-150, and I'd like to just school them. Even if they've got the 3.5 EcoBoost, honestly, even if they have 4-wheel drive, I think the suspension on this is going to be nicer, and it's a hell of a lot lighter. So I would like to be able to beat a stock pickup truck. I think it can do that, keeping in mind that the average price for a new F-150, I think the average is around $50,000. The one that I sold recently was originally purchased for $54,000, and it was 2-wheel drive. It had the 2.7 EcoBoost, it had the electronic locker, the XLT package, all the cool stuff. $54,000 though. Now, I think if you compare it to side-by-sides, I think it'll end up somewhere between, you know, the first generation Razors and the first Rhinos and all those, where they were just kind of go anywhere, fun little off-road vehicles, and this new generation of super expensive $35,000 turbocharged Razors. I don't think I'll be able to keep up with those until, you know, they race on the street, and then it should be able to blow them away past 80. But in the dirt, I just won't have the suspension travel. So to put it in perspective, that's where I'm trying to get. Obviously, I shouldn't be calling it a trophy truck if my expectations are that it's not even going to be able to keep up with the Raptor. But when we go out in the desert, I'm trying to get a couple of my buddies to go with me. My cousin has a supercharged Raptor, which I'd like to compare. And then my buddy Jeff, who, well, you'll meet him in the next episode. He has a Rhino that's pretty built. I think he did the basic long travel stuff on there. I think it still has the 660 Yamaha motor. So it should be somewhere in between those two is what I'm hoping. But just want to tell you guys that's my realistic expectations for it, but you guys can make your own judgments. All right, thanks.